Alas, my plans have not worked. I must now go back in time and create a paradox, and while doing so...
I must stop you from doing so, and in the process, create a paradox.
How paradoxical.
Begin the theme?
Yep.
Wasn't sure. Okay. That got really loud.
Welcome back, everybody, to an Unearthly podcast, and today we're discussing Destiny of the Doctor number 6, Trouble in Paradise, by Nev Fountain, narrated by Nicola Bryant and Cameron Stewart. We have, of course, myself, the Man in Black, along with Mad Matt Winchell and Ron Son McCullough.
Always a pleasure.
Hello.
You know, I think I might have channeled James May for that little opening intro. I think I came off as a little James May, which is slightly disturbing. Because the last thing I want to do is
Cyberman today.
Well, yeah, but at least that's Doctor Who related. James May is a little disturbing. Yes, when I'm traveling around the universe fighting evil, I like to do it in the new Aston Martin Mark IV. That's just wrong.
It's quite brilliant, actually.
I think he would be put on actors I would not want to see play the Doctor.
Oh, I don't know. Depends on how they do it.
No, Captain Slow should not be the Doctor. Neither should Jeremy Clarkson.
Clarkson, yeah, definitely no Clarkson.
And Bill sits there in silence, wondering what the hell we're talking about.
Honestly, yes.
A British show called Top Gear. It's hilarious.
Gotcha,
Go watch it.
I've heard of it.
Okay.
I believe they're coming out with new stuff again.
New Top Gear episode, you mean? Ah.
So, anyway, yeah, news. We're at the news.
Well, first off, Matt, I'm not... let me repost the link to make sure Matt has it, but, I
guess we should apologize for not broadcasting last week.
There was...
wound up with obligations.
Yeah, there were some issues. I'm sure many of you noticed there was an American holiday... Well, probably more than America, but Halloween was last week, and lately the states have taken to screwing up the holiday more and more by having it at random times depending on what city or town you're in.
Mm-hmm.
So that was, that among other things, prevented us from recording when we normally are able to last week.
Yeah, well, you know, it's... Halloween, I've not really celebrated Halloween in like 5 years. Closer to 10, really.
On the real, last time I personally did anything for Halloween, other than buying, I bought some white Converse so I could be the 10th Doctor for work on Thursday. That's the most that I've done for Halloween since 2006.
No, I used to have the bowl of candy, which would get passed out to nobody because no one ever knocked on my door. And then once dusk fell, I would sit down and marathon Evil Dead. For like, you know, your Evil Dead 1, Evil Dead 2, Army of Darkness, go to bed. That was pretty much it.
Gotcha.
This year I did the usual thing where I dress up and scare little kids that come to my house. I got a few good reactions on film, so there will be a vlog on that.
Yes, but you live in Mayberry.
Yeah, but we also had years where we had over 60, 70 kids come through.
No, what I mean is that kids feel safe coming up to your house and trick-or-treating because, Sheriff Andy Taylor's watching everything. And
well, I would argue
even
against
if
that
Barney
because
Fife
the
screws it
freaking
up.
morons in this town want to have Halloween between 1 and 3 p.m.
You see,
This is not Halloween.
Nobody wants. Yeah. Nobody wants to go to the second floor of a building that's lights only turn on after somebody walks onto the stairs in order to see if we have candy
And,
or not.
people that
Which
live in
is
the city,
perfectly
you
fine
have
for
the
me.
secure apartment where, they have to buzz to get in.
Oh, yeah.
Nobody
those,
bothers
yeah.
to trick-or-treat in those. Never stopped me from buying the candy. I just ate it myself.
Right.
Well, that's actually half the reason why I do the stand outside and pass out candies, because any leftovers I get to pick at first.
Okay, somebody's having bandwidth issues. I don't know if it's you guys or me.
Everything's sounding okay to me.
Everything sounds fine to me as well. But yes, I got to have first pick of the candy again, and I'm hoping that next year I'll actually be able to get a mask. Oh, somebody dropped, by the sound of it. There's a problem with this call.
I guess we answered who's having the bandwidth issues.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, which one of us collapsed? Was it me or
That
you?
was you. That was all you, unfortunately.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
hopefully it
I'm in the
behaves
suburbs
itself.
now. Internet's not quite as stable as it was when I lived in the city.
Anywho, yeah. Halloween. Oh, and actually on Halloween Day, I did have one thing special happen. I've been periodically watching the Reviewerverse, and actually I saw guys that are doing a live stream. They did a special for Halloween, and as the finale for their special, they riffed on not Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, Freddy's Dead.
Who did this?
I think it's called Sinner Radio or something like that.
Oh, okay. LC's show.
Not sure. I don't know names. I just know that I've seen them once in a while.
Do you know what site it was on, or did you just go to the stream, their
I just went
streaming
to their
site?
stream site.
Got you. If it was Sinner Radio, it's hosted by LC on RVCentertainment.net.
Yeah, it was definitely Sinner Radio, and I think it was LC. I wasn't hearing you the first time, apparently.
Speaking of similar things, if anybody here follows Cinemassacre.com, they did a feature-length commentary over Night of the Living Dead, which you can do since it's public domain.
Which I have already done.
For Matt Watches?
Yep. That was like episode 3 or 4.
Yep. So anybody who hasn't, whether you've watched that movie or not, go out and look at Matt Watch's Night of the Living Dead and at James Rolfe's commentary of Night of the Living Dead.
There's also James. He did a version as well.
Yeah, he did that this Halloween.
Mm-hmm. It was the finale for his Sim Massacre Monster Madness.
Yep. I did absolutely nothing for Halloween other than get ready for NaNoWriMo.
Meanwhile, as soon as I finally got my season finale out, it's like, it's already October. Quick, pump out a bunch of horror movie reviews.
Right.
Critters 2, Halloween, and Friday the 13th Part 5 is coming up. Ugh.
Alright, so it's been sitting on the stream for a bit, but our they call it news, and it's essentially they're saying that Peter Capaldi might only feature for 13 episodes. What that honestly means is that his contract only obligates him to finish one season. So if he turns around and says, no, I'm not coming back for season 2, it's his prerogative. Now, I'm pretty sure most doctors have had that choice anyway, so this is not news unless I'm very gravely mistaken, but
it also means that if he doesn't actually turn out well, the BBC can just not bother to renew the contract.
That too, but I'm pretty sure that's only happened to two doctors, kind of, but
Yeah,
technically.
Basically one.
I'm just stating it. It's I think the big news, of course, is the fact that he is an older doctor, and we haven't had one of those in years.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
He's-
theoretically, Sylvester McCoy was older, but he wasn't this far older. I think he was in his 40s.
I
Yeah.
think so. I'm pretty sure Hartnell is. Well, was Hartnell the oldest doctor up in?
I
Nobody was
believe
older
so.
than-
Yes.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Capaldi is the same age that Hartnell was 50 years ago.
Yep. And I'm wondering if that had something to do with their decision.
And although he does look a lot younger, which is partially because Hartnell was aged for the show. They added a white wig and everything.
Mm-hmm.
He was partially aged. Yeah, they added a white wig. I believe he technically usually had a crew cut because he was used to playing generals and such.
He
Yes.
played a lot of sergeants and such.
He played a lot of drill sergeant styles. The casting of William Hartnell and the Doctor would be as if you had cast Emery in the role. You know who I'm talking about?
Nope.
I'm trying to remember his first name.
I mean, you don't mean Arlie Ermy, do you?
Or I might be Arlie, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, I'm trying to remember a name off the top of my hat. Usually I look it up
Right.
beforehand.
Yeah. And now I'm picturing Arlie Ermy as the Doctor.
Oh my god, he just never stopped screaming in someone's face.
Well, that's what people thought about Hartnell.
Right?
Oh god. I'm having Full Metal Jacket flashbacks because I've heard quotes from him from that movie. I believe it's that movie, and just using those quotes as he's yelling at a Dalek.
Yes!
I broke Bill!
And that would be awesome. I feel like someone needs to put that video on YouTube now.
But no, I mean that was the kind of role that Hartnell had, was the hard-nosed drill instructor style. And then they cast him as this grandfatherly figure in Doctor Who.
That's pretty much the image he went down with.
Which might be why it took them so long to get him to be nice.
They had to call him out of the army ideals.
Or everyone's like,
Yeah,
"Oh, we're writing for the drill sergeant, so he needs to be a dick to everybody."
Yeah, it was. I was trying to pronounce, by the way, his last name, which I remembered instead of his first name. It's Ermy, is what it actually is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what threw me off, because I was like, all right, I can pretty much trust Randy with names, but everyone does slip up once in a while. So.
Well, Full Metal Jacket's not usually my kind. I mean, I know the guy in
Right.
passing. So
I've-
it's not enough to have been firmly locked into my trivia brain.
I watched the first half of the movie a few times, but nobody seems that interested in playing the second half. Like, I've only ever watched it in groups. Like at military functions, whatever, people would play like the first
Well, that's
half.
because the second half is depressing, bleak, and
Yeah.
contains suicide and such.
Right. Whereas all the funny moments that people like to quote are in the first half.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so imagine him casting a role like the Doctor, and yeah. So, with William Hartnell, it worked. And the fact that the role wasn't defined helped. They're going into this, with this actor, with the role of the Doctor pretty well defined by now, of, who he is, what he does. They seem to think he's a very talented actor.
Right.
I have yet to be convinced of this, just based on his body of work.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen very little of any of his body of work, so yeah. I'll have to wait.
I'm
to
not
see.
saying anything against him. I'm just saying I don't know that.
Oh yeah,
yet.
believe me, everything I'm seeing about him, like the BBC is just like everybody from the BBC is just lavishing praise on this guy. So I hope he turns around and shows us why.
I mean,
next
I
year.
saw him in World War Z.
See, I haven't even
Right.
seen that yet.
Where he played a WHO doctor, coincidentally.
Yep. And he didn't really stand out to me.
And that was kind of the thing in Children of Earth, he didn't stand out to me particularly, although that might have also been because he was doing a good job of what was written. So
Yeah.
I just want to see his versatility, because obviously playing the guy that he was in Children of Earth would not work.
See how he'll be doing in The Musketeers due out next year,
Mm.
where he's playing Cardinal Richelieu.
Might be interesting.
That's going to be, that'll be interesting, because that's a big role.
So while we're discussing this, do you guys think he's going to pick up a young male companion so that all of the fangirls who are upset at having an older doctor can have someone to fawn over?
I don't know. That was traditionally what would happen, but mind you, the reason they do that is so that they would have the younger man to do the action roles.
Right.
Yeah.
And I have no idea if Capaldi's up to doing his own stunts or not.
Right.
Depends upon the stunt, I would assume.
When Tom Baker was hired as the doctor, they originally were thinking they were going to get an older man.
Mm-hmm.
So they had cast the role of Harry Sullivan to be the action guy.
And there's also the fact that you can't do Venetian Aikido with that scarf.
I don't know. The fact is, though, that Tom Baker wound up doing his own stunts. He was younger, and he was capable. That's why Harry Sullivan got axed after a season.
I was like, and Sullivan got all but forgotten.
He got put on a bus back to Unit, and was never heard from again. And is probably assumed dead since his actor died like 4 or 5 years later.
Yep, probably. Wait, 4 or 5 years after he left the show?
Yep. He died relatively young. He died in like 85.
Can we do a podcast without talking about the death of the actors of Doctor Who?
Jesus, yeah, it's like a freaking...
I'm sorry, you're dealing with a 50-year-old franchise. People that have been in this will have died.
But I mean,
we're talking about a guy that was cast in the role in 1975.
I just mean I can't remember the last podcast we had where we didn't discuss somebody's death.
Hey, we're on a perfect episode not to have to go there, but...
No, we're just morbid that way.
Harry Sullivan's a dead man, apparently. Ugh.
So in another bit of news, this was more
he was, by the way, deeply involved with Doctor Who pretty much up until the mid-'80s. Actually, I'm wrong. It was about 10 years after he was cast.
Okay. You mean the actor who played Sullivan, you mean?
Yeah, he was Ian Martyr. He wrote a lot of the novelizations.
Oh, okay.
For Doctor Who. He wrote the first Companions spin-off novel, which was Harry Sullivan's War. He was in the middle of writing a sequel to that when he died, which was going to be using the script that he and Tom Baker had come up with for a Doctor Who movie back in the late 70s called Doctor Who Meets Scratchman.
Was that the one that they saw Star Wars and realized that they were not going to be able to...
Yeah, that was it. They walked out of Star Wars and said, okay, the bar has changed and we can't afford to do this anymore.
Mm-hmm. It would have been nice if they would have finished it.
Yeah. But then pretty much would have been just Doctor Who fans that watched it at that point.
Yeah, they would have never gotten it approved. Was the problem? Was the fact that everybody had just seen what Star Wars could do financially, and it was just
Ian Levine couldn't have bankrolled it.
It would have had to have come through BBC.
Yeah.
Pretty much, yeah. It would have to come through BBC because they own the copyright to it.
Yep.
I mean, he could have bankrolled it, right?
Unfortunately, no, because the internet had not quite been out yet.
Sure.
Otherwise, it would have bankrolled it, and they would have gotten Titmouse Incorporated to actually do the animation.
Oh, if they did it now.
Yeah, that would be interesting, but
oh well.
For our next,
never were.
Yeah. For our next bit of news, this is something that's a bit more actual news. I'm posting a link in the chat to the category on BigFinish.com that has all the news because there's a few articles relating to it. Whatever Matt wants to scroll through to look at, but basically. The Big Finish Doctor Who 50th anniversary special was released a month early, and it pretty much crashed Big Finish's site for a day or so with the sheer quantity of people downloading the digital version.
I'm looking at the news article. Sylvester sees the light.
Yeah.
Wow.
You're just looking
Sylvester
at the
McCoy
photo.
is starting to look like Ernest Borgnine.
Oh, hey, ow!
Look at the picture.
Not that bad, he isn't. He's actually thinner than Ernst Borgnine, at least.
No, I was just talking about the face. Look at that face.
I still don't see the Ernest Borgnine that much. I still see plenty of Sylvester in there.
I don't know. I'm thinking of Ernest Borgnine circa Airwolf. Even, as Cabby in Escape from New York, and it's starting to look familiar.
But yeah, in addition to the digital version being out, my physical copy of it came yesterday, and I almost don't want to open this, especially since I did listen to the digital while it was out. We haven't all listened to it yet, which is why we're not doing our review.
No, I haven't
yet.
listened to it. I've been sick all week, so
I might actually be the only one who listened to the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
No, I caught the flu, and trust me, I was not in any condition to listen to anything.
Right, and I can definitely say if you can afford it and you're interested in classic Doctor Who, pick it up. The digital version's cheaper than the regular version. There's also a limited special edition, which includes a 5th disc with a companion chronicle. So, whichever you can go for, anybody out there, I definitely recommend it. And at some point, we will be doing it on this podcast.
At some point.
Yep.
Let's see here. CD, $64.
Is that the collector's edition, the 5 disc, or
I don't
is
know.
that the regular?
All I know is it says prices CD, $64.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's the limited edition one. That's the one it's the one I have, but I don't think I spent that. I'm not even sure because I paid for it months ago. But there's also a regular 4-disc version, which is cheaper, and I don't think it has as much of the special packaging.
That one is $23.99. Matt, the standard edition.
Ah, okay, for the actual CD.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Then there's also the 4-record vinyl version for $160.01.
Yeah, and this is really the only. I'm pretty sure this is the only one I've seen like that, and that makes sense because this is the only one they could possibly sell enough to be worth producing it that way.
True. And it's a big enough thing that people might actually do it.
And for those wondering, my copy is number 28 of 10,000. So there are only 10,000 of the collector's edition being made. I have number 28. I have no idea how many are sold, and I don't know if Big Finish will tell you. So.
By ordering, how about I get number 42?
42?
Whoever has 42, do not open that for the love of God.
For the love of God, don't open it, yeah.
The universe may be in your hands.
Exactly. Hold on to that thing for another 50 years and sell it. Even to a museum.
42.
But yeah, so if anyone who was
apparently Sylvester had a copy of it. Do you think he got number 7?
That would be nice. They did have actors for the first 8 Doctors, so it would be nice if they managed to distribute the first at least the first 8 to the specific actors who played them. But who knows?
Would be nice. It would have made sense if I had been in their marketing job. I would have done it.
And since this is something we've discussed a bit, the aliens are played by, you can guess who.
Yeah.
The writer
look,
director.
we need alien voices. Hey, Nick, go do a voice. Use your modulator.
So he wrote this. He directed
the modulator.
He wrote this. He directed it. I think he produced it, and he was the aliens. That said, listening to this, I say the same thing I've been saying ever since I heard Sirens of Time, and that is Nick Briggs needs to be the new Doctor Who showrunner. I don't know if Big Finish would give him up, but if they do give him up, he should be the next showrunner.
So, apparently he can write like a madman.
He knows Doctor Who, especially.
Yeah, I would agree for Nick Briggs. If they couldn't get Neil Gaiman, then Nick Briggs. Did I lose you guys again, or?
No. I'm
No.
just looking at the Sylvester McCoy article here.
Sorry, it suddenly became very silent.
Yeah, I know. 'Cause I didn't want to disagree with you, but I didn't really have anything to add to what you said either, so I was just silent to
So
see if somebody else said
that's the
something.
point where you, as the host, goes. Moving on to the next article.
Yeah, I know. You said something first, though. As for the next thing of news, this is not Doctor Who, but it is sci-fi, so I do want to bring it up. The Ender's Game movie has recently been released, and as usual, whenever something to do with the Ender series is discussed, there is discussion of author Orson Scott Card. If you're not familiar with the controversy, it's essentially that Card is an enormous homophobe, and I think he might have other issues, but that's the main one that he and other people focus on. And there are a lot of people really concerned about supporting his career, and I do have a few comments regarding that. I'm not saying I condone his actions or his statements in any way. Of course, he's entitled to his opinion, but to my understanding, he does go a bit farther than that opinion entitlement is allowed. I haven't seen sources, but I've seen some pretty ridiculous statements credited to him, supposedly. But what I do want to basically say is, regardless of whether or not he gets royalties from ticket sales, because I've seen articles claiming both sides that he does or he doesn't, I'm fairly certain he gets more per book than he does toward ticket sales. But more importantly, sci-fi as a film genre is a growing thing at this point. And Ender's Game is not the type of film that is normally made. Regardless of how you want to say it, it's a unique story in a genre that we want to see grow. And
sci-fi kind of
that's the most important thing here.
It ebbs and soars. Because, there was a couple of years where sci-fi was on an ebb after, I would say, the tail end of Enterprise up until Doctor Who hit the mainstream, pretty much. There was a couple years where sci-fi was kind of down, and then, we had Doctor Who, then we had Battlestar Galactica, and everything kind of brought it back.
But as I mentioned in at least one Facebook, the most inane rom-com plot will be greenlit because studios are confident that they'll sell enough tickets to make their money back. And if you're really concerned about whether or not to support Ender's Game for strictly, political and ideological reasons, I personally would much prefer to look at it as advancing the cause for the future of sci-fi films and giving them that same confidence in good sci-fi that they have in those terrible and sometimes good, but usually often terrible films that they're confident will make their money back. So if you don't want to see it because you don't think it'll be a very good film, that's one thing. But if you're going for political and ideological things, I would much rather think of what films my grandchildren will have the option of watching, because honestly, I'm not sure what studio is doing this, but what studio will you think, oh, we're pretty sure that our film failed because the writer of the material it was adapted from is a terrible person. They're going to say, no, oh, this sci-fi film flopped. Well, we're not going to finance any more sci-fi films this year.
Yeah, that's kind of technically what they would look at it as.
And this film has been trying to be made now for about 20 years. So you would think there would have, if somebody would have come up, with a bigger reason than the fact that, oh, he's a bad guy, it would have come up before.
And from what I understand, the film is not the best possible adaptation, although I haven't seen it yet. But either way, I would not avoid seeing it just because of Orson Scott Card. If you want to hurt him, don't buy his new books. That'll hurt him more than not buying each film ticket.
Yeah, pretty much. Doesn't matter how much he'd make off of movie revenue, it still won't equal up to as much as he would make if he buy his books.
Now, on the other hand, if you don't want to see it just because it doesn't interest you, don't go see it.
Yeah, nobody's saying anybody has to see it, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, I have, X amount of money that I use to go to see movies every year. And I think I only got 2 to 3 more movies that I can go to see this year with my budget. And I can tell you right now, one of those is The Hobbit.
Yes,
and
definitely.
the other one's probably going to be Thor.
Oh, God. I gotta see Thor. Thor's coming out this week, isn't it?
And here's the thing is, I very much do. I wouldn't say go quite so far as to say I hate, but I strongly dislike the first Thor movie, and he's probably the Marvel superhero I have the least interest in. That said, I'm probably going to see Thor just because usually the sequel movies are much better than the origin stories.
Dude, Christopher Eccleston
definitely doesn't hurt that decision either.
Yeah,
Oh yeah, and that is Doctor Who related.
As a dark elf. Go.
Yes.
Go, shoot, Baboose, get over there, watch it.
Yep. Christopher Eccleston is a dark elf. The only way that could be more badass is if he carried dual scimitars.
Yeah, by the way, Thor comes out this Friday.
Yeah.
I think it's already out in Europe, I think.
It's out in... The London premiere was October 22nd, but the US premiere is Friday.
All I know is at least one person on the Agony booth has seen it, probably a European, but I didn't look to see who it was because I didn't want to be spoiled.
Yeah, I had my original viewing of Thor was kind of ruined because we were watching it on Blu-ray on a TV that had a certain setting misset on it that made everything look kind of chintzy.
For me, my original viewing of Thor was ruined every time he spoke, but...
Nah, he never bothered me about speaking. It's just for whatever reason... I've since watched it on another TV and have had no problems, but the TV that was in the viewing area of my old apartment made everything I saw on it look like it looked like it had been done by the drama department of my local high school.
If they could, if they could actually do it, and it actually looked literally that way, that would be an awesome, and extremely, I would love to just apply that setting to, something like Alien, just to see what would come out.
Mm.
I know you mean more quality-wise than actually literally being something like that. But if it could, that would be... As a cheesy slasher fan, I would love to just apply that to every movie I saw just to see what came out.
Mm. So apparently Eccleston has said that this role requires 6 hours of makeup and 45 minutes in wardrobe.
That sounds like quality getting ready for work there.
I can see it.
The 6 hours in makeup, jeez.
That's not uncommon for... if...
That's not uncommon for real decent makeup.
Yeah, I've read a lot of interviews from when they were making the Star Wars prequels, and... There's a reason they used to wear their makeup on set all day, and it wasn't because it was comfortable or they liked being in it.
Yeah, this might be something that Aaron and I will have to go see this upcoming weekend.
Yeah,
we'll see.
Tap Fred and Mikey and see if I can get something going for that too.
Okay. So anybody else have any news before we delve straight first into the Sixth Doctor?
Only that I'm apparently losing the connection again.
Arg.
Well, this time I have backup. If I lose the connection again, I'm switching over to tethering on my phone. In fact, I'm actually going to do that now.
Okie doke.
Just give me a moment, please.
Okay.
By the way, I assume you're seeing Christopher Eccleston on the screen, and I would love it if I could actually say his name without stuttering over it 5 times. He's up here, by the way, in the upper corner.
Oh, okay. I thought you meant like an image of just him, and I'm like, no, the stream hasn't caught up yet. If that's the case, but okay, if you mean the big poster with everything.
Yeah, I've even zoomed in on him now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that would have been Randy leaving.
And they've got Natalie Portman on the poster, and apparently, according to Thor continuity, eventually she loses all of her memories of Thor, and then he marries the female of his 5-man band. So I'm waiting to see whether or not that happens.
That also depends upon the version of Thor you're looking at too.
I do not know Ultimate Universe continuity in any way.
Yeah, neither do I. But I believe in even regular continuity, Thor has been kind of semi-rebooted at least twice.
I don't know. All I know is I just recently read a Thor comic from 2008, and Natalie Portman's character was pretty much completely gone, like not even relevant anymore.
I do know, however, that when the comic book series actually started, it was kind of almost like the Incredible Hulk, only that Thor could be summoned with the hammer. And then the guy actually became Thor.
Yes,
a certain made-for-TV movie where Thor was his own entity that was summoned by a hammer either way.
Thor does, when he's on Earth, he does share a body with Donald Blake, unless you're watching The Incredible Hulk Returns.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah, we can now. Yes.
Do I sound clearer?
You sound fine.
Not the same. Cool. Yeah, we've been talking about Thor while we were gone.
Yes, my continuing on this podcast is now brought to you by U.S. Cellular.
Well, it's better than certain other people I could probably mention. AT&T.
Yeah.
My being here is brought to you by AT&T, though, so let's not piss them off too much.
Now watch we start losing Bill.
Where you live, though, Bill, because I'm
assuming
sure that they have a decent connection where you are. Whereas anywhere in Wisconsin, AT&T's connection is a middle finger to your face, essentially. AT&T has never worked very well anywhere in Wisconsin, anywhere I've been at least.
I remember when they were the only option, but that's making myself seem really, really old. Anyway, I take it we're going to move on to our little overview of the Sixth Doctor and Papagelian Brown.
So my thought is to essentially first go over the Sixth Doctor era as seen on TV before we go into any meta details, because I'm sure there are several that we'd like to discuss.
Probably a good page or two, yes.
You can't honestly discuss the Sixth Doctor without going to at least some meta details. So
yeah, well, let's see. I mean, the Sixth Doctor era. Before going into the background of the age he was on and stuff, let's talk about it. He had the most unstable regeneration in the history of the show.
He was also the most prone to random character switches of personality, essentially.
I think you're looking for mercurial is the term you're looking for. He would go hot and cold really, really fast. He tended to act more arrogant, aloof, and distant than his predecessors. He was definitely more loud.
Oh, by far.
Both in his clothing and in his...
Especially compared to his direct predecessor.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The understated, soft-spoken Fifth Doctor goes into this brash, loud, both in voice and taste of clothing, Doctor who spends an entire season with a unstable regeneration, making him all over the place, before he mellows a bit into his more standard operating form, which we see for half a season, followed by a break, followed by one basically season-long episode where he's on trial again.
Mm-hmm.
And that ends with the last we see of him. As the actor didn't even get to do the regeneration scene, so technically, we never actually saw the Sixth Doctor again, except for Sylvester McCoy acting in his stance on the floor in that horrible, horrible coat and a wig.
Yep, and a very bad wig at that.
Perry, on the other hand, we picked up at the end of the Fifth Doctor era, where she was rescued by Turlough, who promptly left the same episode. We talked about that last week.
Yeah, we had the fairly quiet girl who got poisoned and sat out large quantities of the Fifth Doctor's finale, only to watch the Doctor die, become somebody else, and then start to choke her.
Calling her the Terrible Zodin. She then spends the rest of her time being a bit jittery around the Doctor as he becomes, more or less bizarre.
Yeah, and she kind of builds her personality around him at that point, to the point where they're essentially verbally sparring throughout most of their time together.
And she spends a lot of her time exasperated by his, over-the-top acting, up to the point where she's essentially kidnapped by a recurring villain of the Sixth Doctor era and was about to be used to transplant the brain of one of his race into her body. And it either worked and was quickly killed, or she survived and married Brian Blessed.
I believe at the very end they said that she was off with Brian Blessed, yes.
No, well, it depends on whether that's true or not.
From what I understand, the final result was that due to Time Lords fucking things up, there are now several Perrys, at least one of which is dead, at least one of which is married, and at least one of which is traveling off on her own. So,
damn you, Gallifrey.
Take that however you will.
Fan theory.
I'm not sure if that was actually Trial of the Time Lord or if that was like a novelization explaining after the fact.
I think that was a novelization after the fact, because
I think
Trial of the Time Lord itself ended with somebody showing.
I did not watch
with somebody showing the Doctor that no, they actually stopped it in time, and she stayed and married to King Yakarnos. But this, of course, was very much out of the blue.
Yeah.
So it was like, what the hell? So I think a lot of fans have trouble going from A to B.
Right.
I'm not sure why they have so much trouble, but I remember them showing that, and I'm like, oh, okay, she.
Well, it's like Leela at the end of the Invasion of Time, just suddenly deciding to stay behind with Andred.
That one was kind of sudden and kind of felt like a tripping.
That was kind of the same thing with she's marrying King Yakarnos. Why? Yeah.
Why not? It's Brian fucking Blessed.
So
apparently she needed more large ham in her diet.
Be like if Sarah Jane was in the middle of the episode and said, "So Davros, we need to spend more time together."
Yeah.
Actually, I would have a line from the Fourth Doctor to Davros.
Although apparently, according to this episode, he apparently does voices for GPS now.
Brian Blessed?
Davros.
Davros?
Oh yes, that's right. I forgot about that because that was.
All right.
I honestly got the impression more that the 11th Doctor was just fucking with Six than anything else. Like he just was just like goofing off.
I don't know. I was kind of enjoying that particular bit of dialogue.
Like, yeah. Well, yeah. It just seemed to me like he was like, all right, how can I fuck with my former self?
Who here would want to get a GPS with Nick Briggs doing the voice?
Nick Briggs.
You know, the voice of every alien menace in the new show.
Brain does not want to register his name.
Nicholas Briggs, the voice of the Daleks, the voice of the
right here.
You will turn right
here.
I think Garmin or TomTom or somebody has to get Nick Briggs in a booth to do the directions.
Now I'm kind of picturing one voice by Terry Malloy, just like angry Davros screaming at you. Wrong turn! Wrong turn!
You shall turn left here, or you shall be upgraded. Upgrading is compulsory.
Gonna go
Yeah.
back. My first thought is, you take the right turn and it's just excellent.
Excellent.
That would be David Banks doing a GPS.
Turn right in 2 miles.
I mean that makes sense. Didn't they do a series of Star Wars GPS? So why not do a Doctor Who series?
That'd be
guess-
weird.
I think they had like Darth Vader and Yoda Tom Toms.
I do know for a fact that they have Brian Blessed doing one. And yes, Brian Blessed rolls out
it would
random
just be.
clips from anything.
I'm surprised somebody at TomTom hasn't thought of it. Get Nick Briggs and his ringtone modulator into a room to do the GPS stuff.
By the way, while we're on the topic,
I think I need to email TomTom now.
while we're on the topic, does anybody know off the top who they had to do Davros in the new series? I don't think it wasn't Terry Malloy, was it?
No, it was not Terry Malloy. It was somebody new.
I don't think it was
I
Nick
can't
Briggs.
remember him off the top of my head.
No, it's somebody new. Julian Bleach
Ah,
was the Davros from
Stolen Earth.
Journey's End.
Yeah.
Oh, I like some
enough-
Photoshop jobs, by the way, that they did to the Sixth Doctor.
Enough people get Journey's End and Parting of the Ways mixed up that I try not to use those titles.
No, I've got it down pretty well in my head, but
Yeah.
Parting of the Ways is the one that that's the end of Chris Eccleston.
Well, yeah,
Journey-
I tend to remember it by the popular meme that David Tennant's character in Harry Potter last appeared in the chapter "The Parting of the Ways." He then next appeared in the episode of Doctor Who, "The Parting of the Ways."
Now, for some reason, it just files right in my brain. I don't need to create kind of an emetic for it.
Yeah.
He hasn't done much besides Davros. I mean, he was the monster in Frankenstein. He was the Ghostmaker in Season 2 of Torchwood. He was the Nightmare Man in the Sarah Jane Adventures. And his most recent role is playing Machiavelli. Wow. Wow. This is not a lineup of good people here.
Sure.
Yeah, he definitely does a lot of villains, doesn't he?
Yes, he does.
So now that we've gone over the visible aspects of the Sixth Doctor, the Sixth Doctor era was rather fraught with difficulties, especially against Colin Baker.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, ratings were down. They had been, playing around with the format. Doctor Who had been moved to Monday nights out of its usual prime Saturday slot, and ratings had slid horribly.
It pretty much dropped since Graham Williams left, Tom Baker started to leave, and J&T took over.
And Eric Sauer took over as script editor.
Yeah. Whichever of those you want to blame, the point is it was on a downward slide and would continue that way through Colin Baker's second season.
Part of it has to do with Eric Sauer and his rather gritty view of the universe. If you take a look at, like, Resurrection of the Daleks and his view of the universe, it's also very indicative of British television at the era. It's very Blake 7.
Yeah.
But that particular kind of gritty, anti...
it's not a very Doctor Who way of looking at the universe, really.
Well, mind you, it was and it wasn't at the time. What you think of the Doctor Who way of looking at the universe is more of the modern view of it, the post-new series. So it really fit in with that part, but the thing is, it just was kind of, that particular style was losing popularity at the time. and Eric Soward was still writing, gritty. If you take a look at Vengeance on Varos, it's still very much in that style. But it was also very violent. There is one particular part in Attack of the Cybermen where the Doctor is urging Perry to shoot somebody. And that was seen as very not Doctor. Also, in that same Vengeance on Varos, the Doctor winds up pushing somebody into an acid bath.
Yeah.
So, there's some very not Doctor things that are seen that are generally came across unfavorable from the audience.
And
at the same time,
a lot on the Cyberman episode with the Sixth Doctor, where he actually has to shoot down the Cyber Leader and a couple other Cybermen.
yeah,
I actually personally don't have that much of a problem with it, mostly due to the fact that we've already seen the Doctor wielding guns, in particular the Third Doctor, but it's been a while, I guess.
Yeah, the Fourth Doctor came at him across as very much a pacifist. And the First Doctor was much in the same cloth. The Third Doctor was more action-oriented.
I know we've seen the Fifth gun down a Cyber Leader in a rage. But
it was just more... It was the fact that you also went from a Doctor who was very much down-to-earth,
right,
human Doctor, to somebody who was playing it as very alien, very off-putting. It's kind of like the difference between David Tennant and Matt Smith.
Except if David Tennant's friendliness carried over to Matt Smith, if you snap that and maybe made him his friendliness more Eccleston's anti-friendliness, except maybe amp that up even farther.
Yeah, it was that much of an abrupt change, and a good chunk of that was being egged on by John Nathan Turner, who wanted the Sixth Doctor to be as unlike the Fifth Doctor as possible.
And he specifically wanted him to have a terrible fashion sense.
Yeah, he wanted him to have this horrible, world's worst regeneration. Because they had done the unstable regeneration bit from 4 to 5, and it came across very popular. Mostly because Logopolis and Castrovalva were two very well-written episodes.
Yep.
So John Nathan Turner said, it worked before, let's amp that up to 11. And it didn't work. Instead, we wound up with, first of all, his first episode was horrible. It was on my list for worst on the top 10 list for worst episodes ever.
The Twin Dilemma is probably where it's got to be very close to the worst received Doctor Who episode of all time. Not the absolute worst, probably, but it's on most lists.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty high up there. Yes.
It's bad. It's 6 tons of bad.
It's definitely within the top 10.
It doesn't help that they chose to end the season with Twin Dilemma instead of ending it with Caves of Androzani. So you had the outstanding, well-directed, well-written, well-acted Caves of Androzani going on to
this crap with a slug. I mean, really, the Doctor should have seen giant slug monster pulled out a giant thing of salt and ended the episode 3 episodes prior. or ended the serial 3 episodes in. But no, instead... This was also the era that they were experimenting with formats, so a good chunk of the Sixth Doctor's episodes were in 45-minute chunks, as opposed to 25. They had tried it with Resurrection of the Daleks and thought they could pull it off. It was on Monday nights, their ratings were abysmal, and worst yet was the fact that the boss in charge was Michael Grade, a man who was sleeping with either Colin Baker's ex or estranged soon-to-be ex-wife.
Mm-hmm.
And what was Grade's actual position at that time?
He was the head of BBC One.
Okay, so he was
the controller for BBC One. What? Yeah, he was J&T's boss. He was the boss. The only person that would have been higher would have been the overall BBC controller if they had one at the time. I don't know if that was established as the position.
Yeah,
and then, of course, the head of the ministry that funds the BBC.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Queen.
And the Queen!
But regardless...
See, if Colin Baker had the Queen on his side, he might have been able to enact some changes.
But no, not even the Queen was watching anymore because it was up against Coronation Street, I think, or
Shoot.
EastEnders or something.
Actually, I believe at one time it was also up against A-Team, which became a big thing in Britain.
Yeah, but that's still not going to get as much of a rating as British programming. Just to say.
Yeah, I don't know. I heard a lot of people really loved it over there.
Well, that's not to say it doesn't have fans, but just like American programming generally is a lot faster to get a huge foothold here, despite the fact that certain British shows have a very rabid fan base. It'll be it's largely the same anyway.
Regardless of what it is, it's imported programming. It's not going to be on BBC 1 or 2, Matt.
Mm-hmm. That and there's shows where people talk the same way as the people watching.
I don't know
they have
where
the same
they aired
aesthetic
it, but
sense.
I just know it was something that became very popular over there.
But regardless, generally what happened, the fact that Colin Baker's ex-wife was in bed with Michael Grade, whispering anti-nothings in his ear, or basically denigrating Colin Baker to the fact that Grade basically came down like the hammer on the show and got it canceled for 18 months. And then it came back on a trial basis, and then Grade basically said, yeah, I'll let the show continue if you replace the actor.
As if
Which is why Colin Baker wasn't even welcome back to do the regeneration thing.
See, from what I understood was they were basically like, you're canned. Oh, by the way, now that we've, fired you and everything, could you just come back for this short few second scene? And he was like, hell no. That's the understanding
no. I don't get a Swan Song episode? No.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it was and I think it was
perfectly within his right to tell them off.
Yeah, and I mean, most people would have done the same. I'm just saying.
Yeah, it was an asinine move by the BBC to fire him like that, instead of letting him at least get one episode to finish out his run. It was also the amount of bizarre continuity flip-flops in that, especially to do with that final season, The Trial of a Time Lord, where he winds up walking off with a companion who he's never technically supposed to have met yet, and providing evidence from his own future was kind of fucked up. The problem is the fact that episodes in this era were very hit or miss. You either had very well written, very well done episodes, or you had crap.
Mind that
Mark of the Rani was a good episode.
Terror of the Voidboys, complete and total crap.
The Two Doctors can be seen either by some as a really good episode or crap by others. It's fun to watch at the very least because the second Doctor's in it.
Now, just to show how brilliant this era was, the first episode of Trial of the Time Lord, where they're putting the show on trial and essentially saying, all right, let's convince people to watch that, is getting accusations of being too continuity mired and ignoring people who aren't hardcore fans. So, first episode, he calls Perry Sarah Jane, a companion who has not been on screen for over 10 years.
Thud.
Actually, that was a running gag with the second Doctor, is that the whole thing with the unstable regeneration is
the sixth?
Kept calling the sixth. Did I say second?
Yeah, you said second.
Yeah, the sixth Doctor was the fact that he kept confusing Perry's name with other people's.
But especially since the Trial of the Time Lord followed a hiatus, it's probably not one of the first things you want to introduce
and it should
potentially
have been,
new audience.
He should have been stabilized by then. So I think they were kind of going back and trying to play it for humor, and they failed. The Sixth Doctor is an indicative of massive failures on many fronts. You had Michael Grade failing for, basically just letting someone do this instead of giving them a chance to sort it out. You had the production staff failing because they just couldn't get it. They didn't get it. John Nathan Turner didn't get it. Eric Sauer didn't get it. Nobody was getting it. And they were getting pushed in all directions. And it just wasn't working. Really, what Michael Grade should have done, instead of firing the actor, is fired John Nathan Turner and the script editor and had a whole new team come in. And that didn't happen.
And if that didn't fix things, then it's obviously got to be something else that's wrong, and most likely the actors.
Which is probably why when Bill Baggs turned around to the no longer Dr. Colin Baker and said, hey, you want to do unlicensed Doctor Who for me? He did it.
Yep, The Stranger.
Because he didn't have to deal with all of those guys.
Yep, and The Stranger worked because he was allowed to actually have creative influence on how he wanted his character to be.
Mm-hmm.
Something that hadn't actually happened in the Doctor Who production since John Nathan Turner took over in the end of Tom Baker's era.
Pretty much. And that's also why the audio dramas are probably working too.
Yep.
Yes, it is.
Because
the
they
thing
probably have
is,
at least a little bit of say in what they're doing.
And I should
on
note
making
that,
a show successful like this, there has to be a synergy between both the actor, the director, and the producer. That they all get on the same page and are allowed to have some input.
And I should note that out of that 4 out of 6 episodes of The Stranger were written by Nicholas Briggs. who was also the first person to write Colin Baker for Big Finish.
Because he knows what he's doing. And Colin Baker trusts him to know what he's doing.
So it also could have been that The Stranger succeeded because of Nick Briggs.
Mm-hmm.
Again, this is about Nick Briggs for
The
showrunner,
reason
guys.
why Nick Briggs needs to stop doing monster voices and actually get on that show and write for it.
Right.
Because apparently these people need somebody with any talent.
Yes, we know doing the monster voices is fun, Nick, but
Right.
please,
Well, he
let
does that,
somebody
and-
else get a chance to do the voices. Sit down in front of a typewriter or a computer, please.
If nothing else, just
Well, the
restrict
thing is,
him
the thing
to,
is,
like...
he does that, but they need to let him out of the essentially spin-off franchise of Big Finish Audios, which he does a great job at, and let him get a crack at the main series working directly for the BBC.
Yes, put him in the captain's chair, please.
And I wouldn't say even
And-
completely get rid of
and-
him from actually doing voices. Like, maybe have him be like a leader or commander or something of a particular group of monsters.
believe
but not
me,
every single voice.
Yeah, believe me, the fact that he's doing voices at all, considering his executive producer job at Big Finish, says that he's pretty much doing it because he really likes doing monster voices.
Yeah,
If he hasn't
that was
stopped
kind of
now,
what I
making
said.
him exec is not going to stop him from doing any. But bring in some more people.
I just think that he doesn't need to do every one of them. One of the things I really liked
Right.
about the original classic series Daleks was their difference in voices.
Speaking of difference in voices, you and I both kind of listened to this recently. Brotherhood of the Daleks really showed what having different voice, your Daleks be different, can really do.
Yes.
A Big Finish production. It's essentially Daleks who don't know that they're Daleks, and Daleks who think in different ways than regular Daleks. Apparently,
Daleks.
apparently, Colin Baker got in on it and did a few lines as a Dalek as well.
Yeah, because there were Daleks singing a song. Oh
Yeah.
God, that was disturbing.
Daleks
And yeah,
singing.
Colin Baker
Think
had
of
to
that.
get in there and get his voice Daleked so that he could sing part of the song too. And I'm just like, oh God.
I'm trying to remember what the interview said. I forget if the actor who played Charlie did a Dalek voice or if they decided
she
not to be.
She decided not to. She chickened
yeah,
out.
she didn't want to because her voice was too recognizable as Charlie.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't sure if they ended up doing it or not. Okay, so you remember them.
Yes, I do. I remember that interview very well.
Okay. See, I tend to listen to these while I'm on the bus and such, so I'm not always as focused as I'd like to be.
I tend to listen to them while I'm playing an MMO, so my ears are free.
Yeah.
Let's
So
see.
anything else important about Colin Baker or the Sixth Doctor before we go into Trouble in Paradise?
Not really. I mean, like I said, it's a matter of all three of them. Nicola Bryant, It's the first time we've had a character do an American voice that did not make them sound like they were from Texas.
Or from the South.
No, they generally sound like they're from Texas.
They tend
they
to do
have that-
southern accents a lot, though, too.
They have that Houston, we have a problem voice. You always heard on the old 60s and 70s space program voices because it was based in Houston.
I was under the impression that a large majority of the voices were, "I'm John Wayne."
Yeah, it's that deep Texan cowboy voice. So it's either John Wayne movies or it's from the dialogue you hear from the old NASA footage, or both. Either way, they come. Perry was played by an English actress, Nicola Bryant, and the first few times I watched Doctor Who when I was a kid, I couldn't tell.
Oh, I've got a question though. Where did they get the idea that people in America named things like Perpigillium?
I have no idea.
Not a clue.
It actually, I think, was the fact that Perry's parents were botanists.
That might have been part of it, yes.
So
Cheesy, silly
so she
story.
was named after some kind of scientific name for a plant or something.
That's not a half-bad cosplay of the Sixth Doctor.
This is, of course,
I just realized
Had
we went
never
this far talking about the Sixth Doctor without really discussing his coat.
what's to say? It's loud.
Unless you go to the more recent artwork for it, in which case, oh,
Yeah,
thank
where
God.
it's that blue, where they've repainted it blue, and the blue one's not bad.
Oh,
but
there's
God,
also
this-
a black one, too.
And
Black
yes,
one.
John Nathan Turner is solely responsible for that coat.
Yeah.
Colin Baker hated that coat.
I remember the first few proposals of the coat that were offered to him, he pretty much rejected as saying that they're not in bad taste enough.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, they were still too good. Make it worse. And I'm just like, God, what is up with you?
Oh yeah, black coat, this one. I'm gonna go to this image and copy and paste it for Randy, who's probably not watching the stream.
I doubt it because he would have lost connection more than he has, I think.
Probably, yeah.
Huh. Okay, I did not know this. Okay, first of all, yes, Nicola Bryant's accent slips slightly and it wanders regionally. Sometimes she sounds like she's from California, other times she sounds like she's from the Midwest,
Mm-hmm.
and other times she sounds like she's from Florida.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah, that's a common mistake. I'm pretty sure when I'm doing a British accent, my accent wanders around a bit too.
Yeah, I
guarantee it.
I know. I don't try to do a British accent because many times it sounded like I was from India instead. But if I actually succeeded at a British accent, I'm pretty sure it would not stick in one region very often.
I can usually pull an estuary pretty good these days, mostly because I can pretty much pull a tenant. But yeah, the rest of the time I'm doing a British accent, I can speak in received pronunciation fine. That's the British formal language that was used, like for BBC announcers and stuff back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
That is that the one that which is the accent that the first 6 Doctors all had?
That was received pronunciation because at that point the BBC
That's right,
basically.
RP.
Although
And
the third tended to slip into his own dialect a little bit. If you listen to him.
Well, I remember when I was reading about Sylvester McCoy, they mentioned that he was the first not to have an RP dialect.
Yeah, that's received pronunciation. That's also known as the Queen's English. But yeah, because he had the Scottish burr in his voice, the 7th. But yeah, the others, most Shakespearean trained actors know how to speak and receive pronunciation.
Oh, and by the way, as for Matt's black coat link, it looks good, but I wouldn't necessarily consider DeviantArt an official source for what the Sixth Doctor looks like.
Yeah,
Well, I'm not saying it's an official thing that he looked like. I said that I happened to notice it, and that looked kind of interesting.
Okay. It definitely is easier to look at than his real jacket.
Coat, yes.
But apparently, also, Nicola Bryant, when she was using the American, would tend to use British words such as lift instead of elevator.
Yes.
And this was because they told her that using American words would confuse the audience.
Oh, because it was for a British audience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Because it's so hard to figure out what elevator means if you don't hear it every day.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think jumper is far more confusing for American audiences than sweater would be for a British audience.
Mm-hmm. Although I don't know, we're looking at it from
an American perspective.
standpoint.
Yeah. I don't know if anybody British is watching. Where do the words elevator or sweater confuse you? Or truck?
Instead of lorry, yeah.
Lorry, which is a name, not a truck.
But let's see. Also, the fact that apparently Nicola Bryant was told to continue using her American accent between takes and during public appearances because they were essentially trying to cover up the fact that she was not actually an American.
I've got to say, of anything that I've listened to with Perry, while I don't say she does a terrible job, I never thought that. Like, I could always tell that she was. Like, there were times she'd be over enunciating. You can tell she's trying hard to maintain an accent.
Yeah, well, when I was, when I was buying the fact, I was a kid.
Yeah, I could see children being convinced easily, but children is going to be, wait a second, her accent is different during interviews.
I was in elementary school.
Yeah.
So that, and I didn't really become an expert on accents until my high school days anyway. And by which point Doctor Who was in its hiatus mode.
Yep.
Not the 18-month hiatus, the other one.
Yeah, the 10-year hiatus. Well, with a movie in the middle. The 15-year hiatus with a movie in the middle.
And
anyway.
Time.
I don't count Dimensions in Time. It doesn't exist. I know not what you talk about.
That thing does not exist.
Yeah, if there was a short special in the middle of everything, in the middle of that, it was death. It was
Curse of Fatal Death.
Curse of Fatal Death. Thank you. No other specials or bits exist.
But much like how Highlander 2 theatrical cut does not exist.
What?
It does not exist.
Yeah, you just mentioned something. I've never heard of it before.
Highlander 2?
I'm sorry, Matt. I can't make out what you're saying.
Don't worry, Randy. There's actually decent versions of it.
There are?
Yes. They completely rehacked and edited that thing.
I think that's the one that I watched, and I think it was still crap.
I don't know. There's like 3 versions of it now.
It depends. Did they reshoot the acting and the
all of it
dialogue?
No.
And yeah,
actually, there was missing bits that they managed to finish, though.
It's still crap.
And they also completely redid the special effects because
it's
they watched it.
Still crap.
Time. Some people just can't be pleased.
You can polish a turd all you want, Matt. It still stinks as bad.
I will admit that it still seems a little fishy that people in the distant past somehow had machine guns. That's my only problem with the final version that I saw.
If that's your only problem, then I think you're easy to please.
This is a man that deliberately watches bad movies, Bill.
So do I. My favorite movie of this summer is fucking Cozilla.
Okay.
Or should I say that I watched this summer? It didn't come out this summer, obviously.
Yeah, that one.
I watched that 3 times this summer.
I still haven't watched it all the way through once.
Yeah, I think Matt's losing his sensitivity to bad movies.
No, wait till you watch my Watches episodes.
No, you refuse to watch the second part of Series 6.
That's because I prefer to actually watch Doctor Who, not The Adventures of River Song.
And you refuse to watch Journey to the Center of the TARDIS ever again.
Because it's a piece of shit. And I mean, that's the kind of shit that hurts
I'm sorry,
you more
Randy.
than
Now
movie.
I don't know what you're talking about. What is that episode or something that you're referring to?
See that episode, Randy? Does not exist.
Literally.
Should never have existed. The same with the half of that one season. What was that season again? Oh yeah, the short season called 6.
So do we want to talk about Mr. Columbus first, or do we want to talk about
I think we should probably
drama?
do an episode summary.
All
And
right.
it was supposed to be Eli's turn, and he's not here.
Rocket. Not it.
I see everybody's volunteering at once.
Your
Honestly,
show,
not it.
Bill.
All right. This is going to be fairly brief, I think. So the episode starts with Matt Smith telling Colin Baker to find an omni paradox, which is essentially like a paradox except bigger.
A paradox, a most ingenious paradox. Ha 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 ha, a paradox. I had to be said. I said it. Let's move on.
So they. I'm trying.
And
Well,
Bill's
they
trying to
no,
show-
sorry, I'm trying to. I always forget how they end up where they end up, whether it's random or accidental or intentional.
He set the TARDIS in motion. It landed.
Got you. Yeah, they find themselves on the Christopher Columbus's ship in 1492, at which point the Doctor decides to expound on how great it is to get to meet Christopher Columbus, at which point Perry pretty much tells him, "You're an ass, and he's a bigger ass," and goes on to explain what she learned in her history classes, which I believe she got A's in.
I'm not sure I quite picked up the last bit of that, Bill, but essentially, yeah, what she learned in college about Columbus, which you don't normally get in any grade school, middle school, or high school.
No,
Yeah, I love it when they teach you in elementary school how Christopher Columbus discovered America. You start your first year of American history in high school, they tell you, yeah, forget everything you learned in elementary school because it was all wrong.
right.
It's all brainwashed bullshit.
So anyway, they discover the Omni Paradox on Columbus's ship, and they begin interacting with him. Columbus is convinced that the Doctor is essentially a native witch doctor, because he's a very open-minded individual, and they try to get him to cure a man with tuberculosis, who claims he has seen the devil. Perry also sees this creature that the man believes to be the devil, and they get into an argument because the Doctor does not want to introduce modern science to 1492 and cure the man's tuberculosis. So Perry essentially throws a fit, believes that the Doctor is only out is only interested in names that show up in the history book and nobody else, decides that the Doctor wouldn't save her if it came down to it, and runs off to the deck of the ship to prove a point. Unfortunately, due to the ship being rather slippery and the nature of the ocean being what it is, she ends up being pitched off the ship and landing in the Atlantic Ocean. For unknown reasons, this causes the Omni Paradox to disappear, and then
The universe starts ending.
yes, yeah, there is that, because as the Omni Paradox disappears, The universe starts ending, and the Doctor tricks the universe into believing that the Omni Paradox is still there. I'll talk about this later because otherwise the summary will not continue. I'm trying to remember how he made it to land.
Essentially, he managed to track where Perry was because he did find out that Perry was still alive and made it to shore.
And Perry made it to shore because of the creature that she saw earlier that the sailor believed to be Satan, brought her to essentially the Americas. I'm not sure if it's stated. I believe this is an island, but it's not really stated specifically.
Yeah, it doesn't say exactly what island it is. It's just an island with locals.
And we discovered that this creature has essentially managed to mind control the local populace in order to make them into his, do his bidding, so he is able to capture Perry and such. The Doctor arrives. We get some exposition and learn that the alien is essentially the Hive Queen of Buffalo from the past, who was frozen in ice and resurrected in the future, who discovered that buffalo were nearly extinct or completely extinct, went back in time to lure
please give us the name of the alien of the hive buffalo mind.
The herd.
The bovid.
I thought that was just him specifically.
It was him referring to himself and collectively.
Okay. Because he kept saying the herd in all caps.
Yeah.
But eventually, so his plan is to lure white man to the Americas, so they will kill all the Native Americans to stop the overhunting of buffalo, so that the hive mind will work properly. So while the Doctor is there, they realize that, in the Bovid's future, this plan fails because, here's a hint, white men also like to hunt.
And we find anything that looks like essentially we find anything that looks somewhat like a cow to be delicious.
So the Bovid from the future of this goes back in time to tell himself to stop his experiments, because somehow stopping the reason that you went back in time in the first place does not prevent you from having gone back in the first place. That paradox thing.
Paradox.
Yet Perry manages, I believe this was Perry, manages to break essentially the element that allows the Bovid's time machine to allow him to travel back in time, breaks that, prevents him from ever going back in time to have told himself this, and therefore the experiments do continue.
Actually, what happened there is that Perry warned the Doctor that Columbus was about to attack him.
That's right, yes.
Which he turned around and Columbus shot him in the material.
Okay. You're right, I kind of forgot about that. Essentially what happened was Columbus, in essentially a fit of jealous rage, discovered that the Doctor has traveled to more places than him, and this was not acceptable, so he tried to kill the Doctor by throwing a sword at him. Columbus had been, I believe, on the TARDIS with the Doctor when they went to America, because Columbus was forcing the Doctor to use the TARDIS to save his people.
Pretty much.
Yeah, this was after a whole scene where they threatened many times to kill the Doctor if he didn't find the TARDIS key. The TARDIS key had been eaten by a goat, so he telepathically used the goat to open the TARDIS. References essentially Silence in the Library. And we move on. So, because Perry lived to tell the Doctor to look out, causing Columbus to prevent the paradox. This means that the Omni Paradox is still there, because essentially this is the moment where the original timeline and the timeline that we live in converge into one another, which is what the Omni Paradox actually is. It's two alternate timelines, essentially their meeting point, intersection, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, they pretty much. Oh, and then Perry's arguments have finally gotten to the Doctor, and he decides that saving this one man from tuberculosis is not going to greatly damage the timeline. They go off.
And self-justifies it by basically saying, well, the bovine probably gave him TB in the first place.
Right. Which they know is complete bullcrap,
but he's just justifying it.
Yeah.
Bullcrap or buffalo crap?
All right. Can I
think
point
a male
something?
buffalo is still a bull. But anyway, so they go off, and they're as happily ever after as the Sixth Doctor and Perry can ever be.
Okay. Can I point something out before we move on to the next section? This was written by Nev Fountain, who's a comedy writer, best known for his work on the radio and television program Dead Ringers.
Ah.
He has worked with Doctor Who before. He was a script editor on the webcast Death Comes to Time, one of those things I refuse to acknowledge exists. And he has done audio for Big Finish before, including Omega, The Kingmaker, and Perry and the Psychon Paradox. I've listened to Omega before. It wasn't bad. But the other two...
That was part of the essentially four-parter, including Zagreus, right?
I think so, yeah.
Or should I say culminating in Zagreus?
And culminating in Zagreus, yeah, I think so. So it's been a while since I listened to it, but I didn't have that big of a problem with it. The other two, I don't think I have listened to. The Kingmaker I may have, but I don't recall it. It was number 81 in the main series release, so I might have heard it, but I think I might have been half asleep at the time.
Maybe. So he can be really hit or really miss, is essentially the formula we're seeing here.
Yeah, so let's move on.
Kind of sounds like Stephen Moffat.
And
whereas,
now
unlike Stephen Moffat, he can actually write comedy, though. I've seen some of the Dead Ringers Doctor Who stuff.
So, would you say that Curse of Fatal Death is terrible comedy?
No.
That's written by Stephen Moffat.
Well, apparently Moffat lost his ability to write comedy then.
No, Moffat makes a great writer. He does not make a great showrunner. Because he doesn't have time to put the quality into his work he needs to make it work.
Yeah, he can't do a show, whereas if he's doing, like, say, a standalone special in the middle of nowhere, then yeah, he can do it.
That's kind of my issue. So I'd like to move on and talk to a little bit about Christopher Columbus, how he's portrayed in this.
Our returning segment from last week. What was the actual title you gave that segment?
Fact versus fiction, I think.
There we go.
Yep.
Christopher Columbus, fact versus fiction.
Yep. So
he did
last
sail
time
the ocean blue in 1492.
Yes, he did. Here, though, he is portrayed as considering himself to be the world's greatest explorer. This is, as far as I can tell, complete and total crap.
Yeah, the first. Oh yes, he does captain's logs essentially throughout the thing because he does that for whatever reason, and every time he titles it as the the Diary of Christopher Columbus, world's greatest explorer. My first thought was
Admiral Columbus. Admiral Columbus is more or less accurate.
Yes.
Part of his terms for making this explorative jaunt was that he would be given the title Admiral of the Seas, which would enable him to get basically a 10% gross on any profits made from wherever they were going.
Of course, really, I'm sure that if the world had turned out to be flat and he sailed off the edge of it, I'm sure they would have demoted him to captain pretty quickly.
the whole round versus flat Earth thing that people assume with Columbus
Yeah, I
is
think
also.
most, to my understanding, most people believed it was round, but it had not actually been fully proven.
Most people had thought the world was round since Greece. Um, Everybody that was in astronomy circles knew the world was round.
Okay, got you. So it was proven through
Mm-hmm.
the stars and such. That makes sense.
It was proven through the stars and such. It was to the point that most maritime sailors knew the world was round because it made sense. What Columbus actually sailed west on a mistaken assumption that the world was a lot smaller than what it
So
really was.
the whole thing with the maps and the there be dragons here, that was essentially the uneducated, basically.
Yeah, and Christopher Columbus was not an educated person. He was self-taught, but he was one of those people that basically read a lot of stuff and basically formed his own sets of beliefs around it, which he stick to regardless of anything common sense was telling him.
And that you can kind of see in the story, as he pretty much jumps to his own conclusions and holds their ground no matter what's going on around him.
Mm-hmm. But still, I guess that's partially true. But really, I mean, his upbringing was as a businessman. He worked as a merchant. His family were merchants. To be honest, he was a bit of an ass. Yeah, okay, he was quite a bit of an ass. He had basically been scoping around this plan for years. He had taken it to Italy. He had taken it to Portugal. And both times he'd been turned away because they had their scholars had looked at his suggestion and go, no, you're wrong. The Earth is a lot larger than what you're thinking. So you're going to sail out for maybe 2 months and die because you're going to run out of resources.
Everything we learned in elementary school really was a lie.
Pretty much.
More of it than I knew of.
So he eventually wound up trying to sell this idea to Ferdinand and Isabella of Spain. And originally, they're getting told the same thing. Spain didn't want to deal with it because they were busy trying to reclaim a chunk of their land from the Moors. Actually, it wasn't really Spain at the time. This was the Kingdom of Castile, by the way. Was the particular throne at the time.
Well,
it was.
We all know that the Spanish at this time hired Egyptians with Scottish accents. So.
Yeah. But no, this was the Kingdom of Castile because Spain, as we know it, the far eastern part of Spain, was actually in British hands at the time, I believe. Because Catherine of Aragon. I nearly said Aragorn. I've been playing too much Lord of the Rings. Anyway, of Aragon, Catherine of Aragon married King Henry, I believe, of England. Anyway, that put that land under British control at the time. At least I think until maybe it also might have been under Moorish control at this point too. It's hard to tell, you know. Basically, Iberia, which is Spain and Portugal, had been under control of the Moors, which were essentially the Ottoman Empire, for a couple hundred years, and had basically fought bloody wars to reclaim chunks of it. So Spain has been in the midst of one of these wars, didn't want to deal with it, and finally that war finished. They had gotten their land back. They were happy. Columbus pitched the idea to Isabella, who turned him down again But Ferdinand basically had somebody basically run Columbus down and accept. And we're not sure why. He might have just been feeling good. Either way, they didn't expect Columbus to come back. They're like, okay, we could afford to do this. Let's just give you your money, send you on the way, and we'll never see you again. Yeah, you can be Admiral of the Seas, you get 10%, whatever. So they sent off Columbus in the 3 ships. And lo and behold, he did make it back. And then Spain basically managed to spend about 8 years trying to figure out how to con those rights back from Columbus.
There.
Because that was a lot of money, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, it was. It was a huge amount of money. And so they took the rumors of poor government, which was probably true, and, humanitarian stuff, which Spain really didn't care about, to have him deposed as governor and his title stripped in the years 1500. And that sparked off a series of lawsuits between the Columbus family and the crown, which lasted up until about the year 1800. That's right, 300 years worth of lawsuits.
Well, all you
And you
had
thought
to
our
do
legal
was,
issues were bad.
all you had to do was take the family, enslave them, and make them dig for gold for you, and then the Spanish would not have had any other problems with that.
So
Then they could get all of Columbus's legacy.
So Columbus sailed. He first sailed south to the Canary Islands, which was under the control of Castile. And then he restocked provisions.
Has been updated.
And then departed on the 6th of September and wound up spending 5 weeks traveling across the ocean. He spotted land on 12th of October and landed in what is now, I believe, San Salvador.
Sounds right.
Yeah, there's a few other possibilities. That's the one that historians think.
Yeah. I know he had what, 4 trips all told?
I think so.
I think
yes,
one
four
of them
trips.
might have been to the mainland.
He had 4 trips in total. Only one of them, the final voyage, did he actually hit the Central American coast. At no time ever did Christopher Columbus ever land. Actually, no, the 3rd voyage is also on the South American coast. On no time ever did he actually hit North America. That wasn't actually discovered, I think, until a lot later.
Actually, it was discovered a lot earlier by the Vikings, but that's a totally
But
different
they
story.
forgot it. They don't count because they lost it again.
That was Fenric.
That was Leif Erikson, actually.
I know, but I was making a Doctor Who reference.
Yes, I know. And you can keep it. Alright, yeah, he got as north as the Bahamas, probably, on his first voyage, but that was as close as he got. Got to Cuba and the Bahamas. But no, the fact is that, yes, he thought he was in the East Indies, or India, which is, of course, why the name Indians got stuck to the Native Americans.
Despite the fact that this story ends with him saying, "I am fairly certain this landmass is Japan."
Which is itself wrong, because
yeah.
that was not what the Westerners called Japan at the time either.
And you notice that nobody has ever had a problem with people calling Native Americans Japanese.
Right. Japan was, at this point, pretty much a legend that had been told to Marco Polo of Simparku, I believe it was called. And China itself was called Cathay at the time by the Westerners. So, everything got changed around there. When was this taking place? I think he said in December.
I can't remember.
That's a good question because I don't remember them when specifically. Let's check the TARDIS data core.
To the TARDIS!
Speaking of the TARDIS, I've been playing Pokemon Y, and I recently just fought a gym battle in what appears to be the TARDIS, just to kill time while I'm searching this. It's bigger on the inside, and it exists by siphoning the power of the cosmos. Sounds a bit like Rift energy to me.
I can't remember who it was. I think it was like a gym leader or something like that. That looks apparently a lot like David Tennant in one of the games.
No, it's there's an investigator trying to beat Team Galactic, who is essentially trying to go out in space and restart the universe. So yeah, the Doctor was instrumental in that. The TARDIS data core does not say what month it is. Just 1492.
Oh, I know he was listing in September. Historically speaking, Columbus landed on the northern coast of Hispaniola, which is, I believe now, is the Dominican Republic, I think.
Hispaniola is the island that both Haiti and the Dominican Republic are on.
Yes. So he landed there in the 5th of December. And
TARDIS data core now has two color schemes. There's a dark color scheme now. Sorry, I just noticed that.
And he basically skirted across the northern coast of Hispaniola. Until January. So this would have taken place while he was on Hispaniola. He also lost the Santa Maria on Christmas Day. And abandoned. So, you know, I saw 3 ships come sailing in? Yeah, no.
Yeah, I believe at the time he was down to 2.
Yep, he had lost the Santa Maria, and at that point he was down to 1 because he had lost the Pinta. It had gotten lost in, I think, fog or something, and it had wound up traveling north along the islands north of Hispaniola, and it caught up to them on the 6th of January. So.
So yeah.
Oh, no, that's right. It was on 22 November. He Pinzon, his secondary captain, took the Pinta on a unauthorized expedition in search of an island called Babaque, which the natives had told him was rich in gold. So, at this point, there should have only been 2 ships. There should have been the Nina and the Santa Maria. And they should have been on Hispaniola, which was possible. But Columbus was full of himself, but he did not consider himself the world's greatest explorer. And he certainly did not think he was in Japan. And he was a bit of an asshole, so they did get that right.
His treatment of the Doctor, I would say, was fairly honest. It was essentially, you're not a subject of the nation that I represent, and therefore we can do whatever we want to you and treat you as not necessarily a human being.
Still, it was, fairly obvious because he had already come in contact with the natives that the Doctor was not a local native.
Should have been. But
I mean, that was freaking obvious. So it was kind of
he could speak English should have been.
The fact that he could speak English, the fact that his skin was several shades lighter.
It's like you're the whitest man I've encountered.
He was dressed in, loud, but not really loud for the era, and actual woven material, similar to what they would have back home. It's true in a style they wouldn't have, but
Yeah.
Should have been, prime warnings.
Could have been.
So the fact, yeah,
There's a few things that kind of look at this and tilt your head and go, why would he think that? That makes no
Requires
sense.
quite a bit of suspension of disbelief there.
yep. So I think that's about it for Columbus. I guess we should talk about the episode now, huh?
We should just mention just and Terry pretty much hits us on the nail. Yes, when he did get here, there's quite a bit of slavery exploitation and many things that they do not teach elementary school students exist. Never mind that Columbus did them, and that's to a lot of people what he's best known for, rather than being the first European to show up.
Yeah, apparently the big thing I noticed, especially on Facebook, is that he really opened the slave markets again.
Yeah, but
I understand he
at
had
the
to make
at
money
the same
from
at the same
this thing,
time,
but
that was
still.
pretty much happening all over the place.
Mhm.
I mean, look at what was happening in Africa.
Yeah, he was bringing slaves from a different place.
Yeah,
He
so
expanded
I don't personally blame him for that because it was part of the era. If he was doing it today, no, just no. But this was a point where the slave trade was huge.
But I would also add that some of the ways that he treated people, if any of the stuff that they did mention was true in this particular.
Yeah, I was gonna say, do you know if any of Perry's tales of specific specific instances of how the slaves were treated was true or not? Because that's not. I haven't heard of any of those in either regard.
I believe those are actually rumors that might have been perpetrated by the Spanish to give excuses for why they stripped him of his titles. He was not a competent governor. That was obvious. He was harsh on there, but I don't believe he was that harsh. To be honest, the things that she was saying is more of what Cortez would have done.
Probably,
True.
actually,
Yeah.
Because, as bad as Columbus was, Cortez was about 10 times worse.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Lots of really nice people that come from Spain. Bye, Spanish audience!
So, yep, we've discussed Columbus. Should we discuss paradoxes?
Paradoxes don't work that way. Book closes.
Well,
Yeah,
mind you,
plot is a mess.
I can't go into that without starting to put in my opinion on the whole writing in general.
Actually, even the first thing is, this is the first story in Destiny of the Doctor where the 11th Doctor specifically says, "Hey, former Doctor, I need you to go on this adventure. Like, not an adventure you're already on that I need you to change for the sake of something. I need you to specifically go on this adventure that you otherwise wouldn't have been on for me." And I don't know if that could possibly be justified by the 11th entry to the series. That does not even sound sensible.
The entire thing is nonsensical. Pretty much from the moment it starts.
Which, as I was mentioning to these guys before the podcast started, I'm kind of wondering if that in and of itself is an homage to the Sixth Doctor era.
I don't know.
I'd take slightly an homage to it, yeah, a little bit. Because there were times.
If so, it was an homage that they should not have done. Because this was the entire premise behind this was just horrible. It was stupid. It was written stupidly and then finished well. It's really weird because the dialogue is nice and witty.
Yeah, the dialogue is good. The directing is as good as Big Finish always is.
There are certain scenes. Certain scenes are very well done, but it doesn't change the fact that the entire idea of them going to fetch the energy off of a paradox, a super paradox, etc. The alien invader was pretty much idiotic.
Yeah.
And Columbus...
And the alien himself was very dense in the head, yes.
Mm-hmm. It came across more like a parody than the actual show. And when you're writing for something like this, that's a mistake.
Yeah.
It was a very disappointing for me listening to this, because it's something I would have expected, like, yeah, out of Dead Ringers. But, not what I'm looking for from a Big Finish. And then, of course, the elegant polish up on it on the end. As I mentioned earlier, you can polish a turd all you want, but it's going to smell just as bad. And that's kind of how I feel about this.
Yeah, so far I've listened.
In the groin, whereas I'm like, I had fun with it. I didn't think about it too hard, but I had fun with it.
It's had some okay things, but especially like the more I think about the writing, the more it just doesn't like.
Yeah, some of the writing doesn't make sense if you really think about it. And even I had a little bit of that, but I just kind of went, eh.
I'm looking at it not only as a piece of work, but also as part of this big epic story.
Right, as part of Destiny of the Doctor, the 50-year celebration. I mean,
if this had been on its own, strip out the 11th Doctor asking for stuff, the importance of that, and you just written this by itself, yeah, I could have taken it.
Right.
I would have thought it was a bit stupid.
Yeah.
I would have thought it was a bit stupid, but it was, it would have hit me like Doctor Who and the Pirates does, not to be taken that seriously. But as part of this big epic storyline Big Finish is trying to do for the anniversary,
it doesn't feel like it's very much a necessary thing, although we may be proven wrong on the 11th episode.
We will see, and if so, I will then change my statement on it, but I just think that this was not the script I would have used.
Yeah, it definitely feels like it just kind of went off on its own anyways.
Although that said, tricking the universe into thinking that the paradox was still there does sound like something Moffat would write in the show today.
Yeah, in a
possibly. Yeah, it didn't make much sense to me.
Again, paradoxes don't work that way.
And this isn't the first time I've seen this as a plot point of trying to trick the universe into thinking something is still there. The universe isn't an angry god trying to eat you because you removed the shrine from the temple. It's the universe. If it's ending, it's just ending. You can't trick it into not ending. It's not the way ending works.
And it's not a 5-year-old that just believes just because he can't see it, it's not there.
It's just, I was putting that lock and stock with how it was written. It was just,
yeah.
What the hell?
And then the climax in which, I mean, you can kind of hear me when I was describing it. Just it's the guy is he's going back to create. Well, he's going back in the first place to create the paradox by changing the past, which is generally considered bad. But this guy's kind of an incompetent time traveler. He then decides to go back again to tell himself that the reason that inspired him to go back to stop that. So
I think I saw this plot once on a Saturday morning cartoon.
Well, let me try and simplify this thing down. He came back from the future to try and stop the people that were going to kill his native people, or so he thought. He then makes a time machine, perfects the time machine in order to then go to the future again to see how things turned out, to which they turned out horribly, to which he got lost in time for numerous years, before finally getting back to the right position at the right time to tell himself not to do it. And just as he's about ready to get that message across, the time thing snaps and he disappears.
And the Doctor and Perry remember this happening, but he himself, even though he communicated with himself at the same time that the Doctor and Perry saw him, does not remember this. Presumably because he's
I remember that the Doctor and Perry are outside of time, technically speaking.
But he's a time traveler too, so if they have any sort of immunity, so should he.
But it's his own timeline, so ergo his own timeline got snapped.
I guess.
It was more of a direct effect on him than the people around him.
Y'all are getting time travel headaches.
I'm doing just fine here. I think Bill's one getting a headache. See, I can make sense of this.
Because I'm just thinking about, like,
it's a really bad circular time travel notion, but it's there.
Okay, to put this into real life, say I made a bad burger tonight, and I decided to go back tomorrow night to stop myself tonight from making that burger. What would have, if that actually straightened out into a single timeline, what would have inspired me to go back in the first place? Absolutely nothing. So, is this creating another alternate universe? Are we splitting off several universes here?
I've had those kind of thoughts too.
And that, I mean, that's not a problem in and of itself because paradoxes happen, but the fact that they're not treating this as a paradox, and they're actually treating it as...
You still go back in time because you realize you have to go back in time to tell yourself not to make a bad burger. Huzzah!
Possibly. But still, the fact that they're not treating this as something that needs to be addressed, and they're just treating this as something that would stop a paradox instead of being a paradox itself, is mind-boggling. All right, but let's on a different tack though, unless someone does want to expound on that. If we ignored all of the time travel and everything else, what did you guys think of the hive mind buffalo?
It was as a concept? It's the kind of silly that would have come out of the 80s.
It was, I was just, no, it's basically the Silurian. It's basically they took the Silurian story and applied it to bison. I was not really...
Except for, if you ignore everything else, and just the idea that before being overhunted, buffalo had a hive mind and were ruled by, I guess, a king instead of a queen, that was the one super intelligent one. Does that... How do you feel about that? Because I'm kind of conflicted. It seems risky, but at the same time, I think I could have bought it in different contexts.
Yeah,
I could have bought it in different context. I mean, that's basically taking the mentality of bees.
Yeah, exactly.
And applying it to that. So it's it's something that has happened in nature.
And has happened it's not in the show's franchise, but they didn't do it as well as they could have.
Yeah, and we've never seen it done with mammals, which is another issue entirely.
Right.
But then again, we are talking about bison here.
I'm trying to think of the closest we've had to that being done with mammals, and I think the closest is just, like, extremely obedient species, like, for example, things like sheep herding is probably the closest we have to that in an actual mammalian race.
And that only kind of works to a certain extent, too.
Yeah. because they're still separate individuals within the herd.
Matter of fact, I actually saw that Top Gear episode again where they tried to herd the sheep on bikes. The British guys did horribly, by the way. Go take your stick, set them right side up again, and we can get the show going.
Okay. Now we're back to Top Gear.
Hey,
We've
he
gone full
mentioned
circle.
sheep, and I went, you know what? I saw that episode of Top Gear again.
So what Matt is saying is that he wants Big Finish to do a Top Gear run.
Not necessarily. I'm pretty sure those guys could do their own audio version show if they really wanted to.
Okay, on doing a little further research, there were some rather horrific accusations pointed at Columbus.
Oh.
Apparently, he had once punished a man found guilty of stealing corn by having his ears and nose cut off and then selling him into slavery.
Ooh.
Apparently, another testimony in court. This is all found in a document that they found in 2006 somewhere in the Spanish state. In the state archive in the city of Valladolid. Contains testimonies from 23 people, including both enemies and supporters of Columbus, about Columbus and his brothers' treatment of subjects during his 7-year rule.
Okay.
Apparently, at one point, a woman had stated that Columbus was of lowly birth. Bartolome had her paraded naked through the streets and then had her tongue cut out.
Ooh.
At one point, there was revolt that he ordered a brutal crackdown in which many natives were killed and paraded their dismembered bodies through the streets.
I can kind of understand why he'd go to that kind of extreme. It's kind of almost Vlad right there.
This is the same era as Vlad.
Mm-hmm. So he took recent ideas and did them well, in case of trying to protect himself, at least.
There also was a report of systematic brutality against the natives and engineering a program of forced labor that reduced their population from millions to thousands in a little over a decade.
Jesus. Also, selling them off on the slave market probably didn't help those numbers either.
But see, the quote is, endless testimonies prove the mild and pacific temperament of the natives, but our work was to exasperate, ravage, kill, mangle, destroy. Small wonder then if they tried to kill one of us now and then. Husband and wives were together only once every 8 to 10 months, and when they met they were so exhausted and depressed on both sides they ceased to procreate. As for the newly born, they died because their mothers, overworked and famished, had no milk to nurse them. And for this reason, while I was in Cuba, 7,000 children died in 3 months. Yeah.
Yeah, there's some problems there, dude.
I still think those actual examples that were used were from Cortez's era, because that's more his style.
Mm-hmm. That was kind of more of his style.
You mean the examples that Perry described, you mean?
Yeah, the chopping off hands if they didn't come back with gold deal.
Yeah, that's something Cortez would have done, but forced labor camps...
Forced labor camps and slavery, that sounds a little more like Columbus's deal.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, we definitely knew those, so yeah.
And some of the extremes they would go to, yeah. But not quite the lop off your hand for no apparent good reason.
Not send a child out to look for gold. If you don't get any, by the time you come back, they cut your hands off. No. Because that just means that you, yeah, that one seemed a bit overdone.
He would have bad things that he would still do to people, but not those kind of things in particular.
Not send somebody on a pointless task and then punish them for not succeeding.
Mm-hmm. Mostly he'd punish people if they were actually poking out at the fact that he's being a douche.
Mm-hmm.
And an asshole. and that he doesn't belong in his seat of position. And also, again, fighting back against the natives, because they started to kind of get a little more smart to what his goings on were doing to them. They didn't catch on fast enough, but they did eventually catch on.
Now, I don't know. Those particular examples could also exist and are just not listed here. I mean, I'm not having a time to peruse the entire document that they found, even if I could get access to it, but, you know, who knows? I mean,
So
you know, none of
on
us...
that dark note. Yeah, this was kind of an episode, but hopefully it ties together better when we finally get to the end. But we'll wait and see on that. Is there anything else we actually wanted to talk about on the episode itself?
No, I think we're at least as far as I'm concerned, we're good
No,
for
we've
rating.
managed to go 2.5 hours now.
I was thinking it was getting a little bit long.
Well, actually, 2:15, I think. Yeah. So, rating.
Eh. I guess
Now,
put this.
I will say this: Nicola Bryant's reading of it is very good.
Oh yes.
Yeah, she did.
She manages to capture her original voice. The doctor's voice, I actually could hear
A little
the
bit.
doctor's nuances in her voice, and still keep a separate narration voice, which I really liked.
Mm-hmm. So yeah.
Actually, I should have pinned. Did she narrate in her natural accents?
Yes.
Yes.
She did, and then she switched. She actually increased an octave and changed her accent for speaking as Perry.
Mm-hmm. Right, yeah. And then she had a whole
because she was narrating like this,
for...
and then she talked with Perry like this.
Right.
And then she managed to get that hard,
and I'm pretty sure she managed to really do Colin, even though I think there were a few times he sounded a little like Hartnell, but then again, when Colin himself is speaking, I think Hartnell sometimes. So that wouldn't be her fault.
That wouldn't have actually been a much of an actual bad thing either.
Yeah.
No, he came off pretty well. Colin Baker is one of the eras I know relatively well, because I was watching those episodes as they were first coming over to America.
It doesn't hurt that it's a fairly short era.
Yeah.
For him, yes.
But, so... Yeah, that particular voice, the voice and mannerisms were good.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a positive note.
Yes. So
the
overall,
writing...
I would say for a final score, it's kind of a mixed bag. So, it's not like a terrible mixed bag, it's just watch what you're listening to and compare. I'd say 3, 2.5, maybe at most, as an extreme low.
I was going to say a 2, but when you look at the acting, the directing, I think I'm going to go with give it that bump up to 2 or 2.5.
I'm going to have to go with a solid 2 on it, just because I really, really, really didn't like the writing on it. It seemed to drag it down in many aspects. The directing was okay, if there was directing. I mean, basically, it's mostly Nicola Bryant reading the story.
Well, there's also the other guy who did Christopher Columbus, and
well, I know you.
Purposes, he didn't do him too bad either.
Like I know you usually notice the musical cues a little more than I do. So
Hmm.
I didn't notice too much music actually this one.
No, I didn't either.
No. I can't remember any sound effects. Do you guys?
I remember sound effects when the universe is about to rip itself apart.
Yes, you're right there.
And the TARDIS in motion, but no, I don't remember much of the rest of it. But yeah, it's just the writing on this one just really turned me off.
It didn't really bother me too much, but to each their own, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So it might not bother you, it might bother the hell out of you. Overall, I think it's, 2.5 2.25. 2.3
Well,
something.
depending. Did you give it a 3 or a 2.5?
I'd probably be more. If I was to be really strict on it, probably about 2.5.
2.5, 2.5, 2. So yeah, about 2 1/3.
Yeah, it's the lowest score we have so far for Destiny of the Doctor as well.
Yeah, and this was by far the worst episode.
I think it deserves that fact. Yeah.
Mhm.
There's only one that I would compare to
and
it,
I
but
will
we'll see when we get
I'll
there.
absolutely say that it is to say nothing wrong with Nicola Bryant's acting on it.
No,
Oh,
right?
absolutely
Yeah,
not.
she was
That low
definitely.
score is almost entirely
It's
um
entirely the script
yes.
that they were kind of forced to
It's
go through.
Yep, it's entirely as I mentioned, what's his face? The writer.
Nev,
Nev, yeah, that's entirely that score is entirely on your head, Nev.
pretty much. You could have done better, and we know you could have done better.
Nev, and possibly even at you, Nick Briggs, for getting Nev to do this one.
Mm-hmm. And on that bombshell, good night.
Yeah. So we'll be continuing with our Big Finish audios next week. See everybody then.
Good night.
Later.